I'm Tristan, 29. The day I caught my wife cheating on me with my younger brother was the day I realized no matter how hard you try to escape your past, it can still gut you without warning. But I won't pretend I'm innocent in the way it all went down. I've done my share of vile, rash things, letting anger get the best of me. If I'm painted as a villain, so be it. That's the truth anyway. I grew up in a suburban Midwest household, the older of two sons. My parents liked to say they loved us equally, but if you asked anyone else, they'd have said Paul, my brother, was the golden boy from day one. He was the one who got all the extra attention, the bigger portion at dinner, the brand new toys. I was the one told, be a good big brother. Paul's younger. He needs more from us. That might sound harmless, but it built resentment like a slow-dripping poison. By the time I was a teen, I saw the pattern. They'd celebrate Paul for small accomplishments, while my own big moments went unrecognized. The day I got accepted to college, for instance, my parents told me not to gloat in front of Paul in case he felt overshadowed. Then they threw him a congratulations party for some trivial math contest while ignoring the fact that my acceptance was a huge deal. I decided that day I was done with them. At 18, I left home, got student loans, and never looked back. I didn't speak to them for years, scraping by on meager wages in college, living in a crap studio with a friend. Meanwhile, Paul enjoyed life under their roof, free of financial burdens. By my mid-20s, I'd found some success in tech. I was working for a data analytics firm, slowly climbing the corporate ladder. That's when I met Alyssa. She was 25, tall, with a confidence that demanded attention. She always held her head high, spoke her mind, and boasted that she wouldn't settle for ordinary. I was an idiot for feeling flattered she chose me. We dated for a whirlwind year, me paying most of our expenses while she hopped from one marketing job to the next. Then she quit working entirely, deciding I should be enough to support her. I told myself it was love, that she'd eventually find her niche. Instead, we got married quickly, and I sank into the routine of paying for everything, letting her enjoy the stay-at-home lifestyle. For a time, I thought that was normal. I'd grown up in a lopsided household, and some twisted part of me was used to it. Then Paul got in touch with me on social media. He said our parents missed me, that they felt sorry for our old conflicts. Maybe I was lonely or naive, but I agreed to meet them. I figured people change, right? Maybe this can be a new start. Our first few interactions were civil, if awkward. I introduced Alyssa to them, and to my surprise, they all seemed to get along well. Dad told me, "See, we can be a family again." Mom complimented Alyssa on her style. Paul started dropping by to watch sports with me sometimes. I tried to loosen up around him, ignoring the leftover bitterness from childhood. Eventually, Paul came over more often than I thought normal. He'd linger in the kitchen while Alyssa cooked, or he'd show up in the afternoon when I was at work. I felt a vague unease but couldn't put my finger on it. Then Alyssa told me she was pregnant. I can't lie, I was thrilled. I'd never imagined myself a father, but hearing the news, my heart soared. For the first few weeks, I was over the moon. But something was off. Paul started acting bizarre, placing his hand on Alyssa's stomach, making jokes like, "I'm gonna be the best uncle in the world," then winking at her in ways that felt too intimate. I'd come home from work and see them whispering. If I asked what was going on, Alyssa rolled her eyes and snapped, "Relax, he's just excited." But the tension in the room stuck to my skin like static. I thought maybe I was paranoid, so I tried ignoring it. A piece of me desperately wanted it all to be in my head. Then one day, I found a pair of men's boxers under my bed that sure as hell weren't mine. They were some flashy designer brand. I stared at them for a full minute, my mind racing. Alyssa never wore men's underwear. There was no reason for these to be anywhere near our bed, unless another man had taken them off in there. I felt my blood pressure spike, my ears rang, yet I couldn't bring myself to confront her immediately. I needed more certainty. That's how I operate, gather evidence before I strike. I started checking her phone in secret. I'm not proud of that, but suspicion can turn a person desperate. I waited until she fell asleep and tiptoed to the nightstand, flicking through her messages. I found flirty texts with my brother Paul, dating back for months, including lewd pictures and references to hooking up in my own bedroom. They joked about me never catching on. They even plotted how they'd eventually come clean after the baby was born, with me on the hook for child support if they could spin the story right. My hand trembled so violently I almost dropped her phone. I confronted her in the morning. There was no gentle approach. I yelled, You've been screwing Paul behind my back in my own bed? She tried the classic denial, but it collapsed quickly under the weight of those messages. Then she pivoted to blame. You work all the time. I was lonely. Paul was there for me. I needed attention. When I pointed out the underwear, she sneered, You're so dramatic. You never gave me what I needed anyway. A wave of white-hot rage shot through me. All the images of them together, her moaning for him in my bedroom, filled my head. But I clamped my mouth shut, afraid I'd do something I'd regret. I filed for divorce immediately. The betrayal was so raw I couldn't function. My family? They sided with Paul. My parents said, Come on, Tristan, she's pregnant and needs stability. You shouldn't just leave. I hissed that the baby wasn't mine, but they insisted that didn't matter. Alyssa had been my wife. I had to step up. You can't abandon a pregnant woman, Mom lectured. This is partly your fault for not satisfying her. I felt my stomach coil with hatred. It was classic family spin. Blame me, coddle Paul. I told them all to go to hell. But it didn't end there. Alyssa's lawyer, with support from my parents and Paul, hammered me in court. They claimed I was controlling, forced Alyssa to quit her job, had a violent temper, and tried to sabotage her. All lies. But my mother even testified, saying I'd had anger issues since childhood, that I was untrustworthy around women. I watched the judge's face morph from neutral to disapproving. I was too numb to fight properly. The result was a monstrous settlement. Alyssa walked off with a chunk of my savings in the car. I got to keep the house, but I resented it now. It felt tainted. For months, I was stuck in a fog of fury and humiliation. I'd drink myself to sleep, turn up at work exhausted, and lash out at coworkers if they asked me personal questions. Still, I channeled some of that bitterness into work, refusing to let them see me crumble. Eventually, my efforts caught the attention of upper management, who promoted me. Better salary, better position, a company vehicle. It was the first good news in a year. Feeling triumphant, I posted a casual update about my new job online. Big mistake. Within days, my phone lit up with messages from my mother, who demanded I come visit. I tried ignoring it. She escalated, cornering me at my office building, ranting at the receptionist, refusing to leave. Finally, I caved and promised I'd stop by their new home. They'd used part of the divorce settlement to buy a bigger house, presumably so Paul, Alyssa, and the baby would all have space. Yes, she'd given birth about 3 weeks earlier to a little girl. The day I arrived, Paul wasn't home, and Alyssa was napping in a back room. Mom and Dad ushered me into the living room. I braced myself, expecting them to demand something. Sure enough, Dad cleared his throat and said, Your brother lost his job and we're having a tough time paying for everything. It's not just the mortgage. There's also the baby's medical bills. That last phrase gave me pause. Medical bills? I echoed. Mom explained that the baby had been diagnosed with a serious condition that required expensive treatment. She started crying about how the child was innocent. As though I was personally letting her suffer, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, that baby was innocent. On the other, she wasn't my child. She was a product of my brother and my cheating wife. And yet my parents hammered me with guilt. Dad said, Don't you have any decency at all? This kid's in trouble. You're the one with a good job. You owe it to us. When I growled that it wasn't my responsibility, Mom hissed, She was your wife, Tristan. You failed to keep her in line. Now the baby's paying the price. You can't just walk away. I was stunned. Keep her in line? Are you insane? Dad retorted, I don't care how you phrase it. If you'd done your husbandly duty, she wouldn't have strayed. You neglected her. That's on you. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm. Then Dad dropped an even more ridiculous statement. Plus, you never bonded with your brother when you were kids. You stayed aloof, always running off with your own problems, never teaching Paul the right path. Maybe if you'd been a real older brother, none of this would have happened. I felt something snap inside me. I stared at them, trembling with rage. So now you're blaming me for Paul's entire destiny? They actually nodded. I realized I couldn't handle another minute in their presence. I stormed out without answering. As I opened the door, there was Paul, stepping onto the porch. The second he saw my face, he tried to speak, but I shoved past him. He grabbed my arm and said, Hey man, can we talk? The tone was fake friendly. My father rushed over, telling me to hear him out. I wrenched my arm free, spat out, I don't want to talk to any of you. I started marching down the walkway, the rain spitting on the pavement. Paul hurried after me, stepping in front of me by the driveway. He wore a cheap grin, as if he was about to perform some act of humility. Look, I know you're pissed, but Alyssa needed attention, man. You were never around. I was just being there for her. You can't blame me for that. That smug justification was the final straw. My vision blurred red. I roared, "Shut your mouth!" and lunged at him. I slammed my fist into his chest and grabbed his collar with my other hand. I heard Mom's panicked scream in the background. I lost every ounce of control. Paul struggled, trying to push me away. I drove him back until he tripped over the curb. Then, in a flash of madness, I spotted his car parked crookedly behind mine. My chest burning with fury, I stomped over, yanked open the driver's door, and jammed my foot onto the gas pedal while turning the steering wheel so it smacked into a low hedge. It wasn't a full-blown crash, but it scraped the side enough to do some damage. In the chaos, Paul shouted, "Are you insane?" I charged back to him, lashing out, slapping him so hard across the face that my own hand stung. He staggered backward, face contorted in shock. Mom shrieked something unintelligible. Dad bellowed, "Stop it, Tristan!" But I was on a rampage. I yanked Paul's collar again and hissed in his face, "You had the nerve to screw my wife in my own house, you piece of garbage! I'll end you if you ever come near me again!" Paul gasped like a cornered animal. He tried to justify it one more time. "She needed me, man! You practically handed her to me by never being around!" That just fueled my rage. I slapped him again, not caring about the ring of neighbors peeking through windows or from their porches. Finally, Dad wedged himself between us. "Get the hell off him, Tristan!" he roared, pushing me back a few steps. I glowered, chest heaving. Paul clutched his jaw, eyes blazing with fury. For a split second, I thought he'd swing at me. Instead, he just spat, "You're a psychopath," and stumbled off toward his damaged car. I turned to my father and mother, who looked horrified. Before Dad could speak, I snarled, "Don't you dare blame me again for his life. He made his choices. He's the one who stuck his Johnson into my wife. That's not on me." Dad opened his mouth, but then scowled and barked, "We still need money for that baby's treatment. You want your niece to die?" The word stung. I had to remind myself she wasn't my child. Not biologically. My stomach twisted, though. As I turned away, Dad grabbed my shoulder. "Don't walk away. You're the oldest. You think you can do this to your brother and just leave? You have an obligation to fix this." His grip tightened. My instincts flared. I spun around and slapped his hand away. "Obligation? After all the crap you pulled in court, after testifying against me? You better pray I don't break your jaw for everything you've done." He got in my face, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You watch your mouth. I'm still your father." I gave a bitter laugh. "Father? You haven't been one since the day I turned 18 and left." He pressed his lips into a thin line and barked, "We never turned our back on you, Tristan. You're the one who left your little brother behind. Now you have the nerve to come here, wreck his car, assault him, and refuse to help a sick baby?" The contempt in his voice made me snap. I reared back and slapped him so hard my palm felt numb. He stumbled, cursing, and clutched his cheek. Mom screamed, "Oh my God, you monster!" Dad's eyes burned with hate as he stared at me, stunned. Then he whipped out his phone. "I'm calling the cops," he growled. I froze, adrenaline pounding in my ears. Part of me wanted to seize that phone and throw it, but I stepped back instead, my breath ragged. Fine, let him call. Maybe I deserved it. I'd attacked my brother and father, but in that moment I was too furious to care. In the distance, I could see Paul rummaging in his battered car, looking terrified and enraged. Dad dialed. He spoke rapidly, voice quivering with fury. "My son assaulted me and my other son. Send someone quickly." He gave them the address. Mom glared at me, tears streaming down her cheeks, wailing about how I'd lost my mind. I took another step back, trying to quell the violent quake in my hands. This had escalated beyond all reason. I heard sirens in the distance soon after. The neighbors definitely were watching from behind curtains, some stepping onto their porches to see the show. I didn't run. I stood there with rain drizzling over my hair, letting it soak into my jacket. Dad was pacing near the front door, wincing and checking his reddened cheek in the reflection of the glass. Paul was behind him, icing the side of his own face. The police car arrived. 2 officers got out, scanning the scene. One was older, with a no-nonsense look. The other, a younger guy with cautious eyes. They asked, "Which one of you called?" Dad raised a trembling hand and pointed at me. "He slapped me and my younger son. He also damaged my son's vehicle. We need him arrested." The older cop squinted at me. "Sir, is that true?" I took a breath, trying to steady my heart. "I admit, I did hit them," I said quietly. "They provoked me." The younger cop stepped between me and my father. Let's calm down. Anyone need medical attention? Paul, nursing his jaw, said, I don't think so. Dad was still panting angrily, but he shook his head. I'm fine, Mom screamed. No, I want him punished. Look at Paul's car. Look at their faces. He's a menace. The older cop frowned. Ma'am, if you'd like to press charges, we can file an assault claim and property damage. Are you sure that's what you want? Dad nodded, though he looked uneasy. Paul, with unmasked hatred, blurted, Absolutely. Lock him up. I stood there, accepting it. Part of me thought, maybe this is for the best. Let me pay for what I did. But something inside twisted with bitterness. The younger cop turned to me. Sir, do you have any statement? I must have hesitated a bit too long because my father piped in, He's got no excuse for violence. I cleared my throat. This man, my father, has been harassing me. So has my brother. They demanded money for my ex-wife's baby. I snapped. I won't deny it. I attacked them. They lied about me in court and I lost a lot of money in a divorce because of their false testimony. Today, they tried to blame me for everything, even my brother's job loss, and claimed I had to pay for the baby's treatment. I lost it. The cops exchanged a glance. The older one said, We can either mediate this or take statements for an official arrest. Which route do you folks want? Dad's face was red, and Paul's expression seethed. But I noticed a flicker of doubt there. Maybe neither wanted the hassle of a messy legal fight. Mom, though, looked vindictive. He's dangerous. Arrest him, she said. The older cop nodded slowly. All right, we'll do it by the book. I found myself being cuffed, the cold metal biting my wrists. I glared at Paul and Dad. I hope you're happy, I muttered. Paul averted his eyes, but Dad said nothing. Mom stood there, lips pressed tight, tears still on her cheeks. The cops led me to the squad car. My mind reeled. I felt no regret at that moment, just a savage sense of emptiness. They'd broken me, and I'd responded with violence. This was the final collapse of whatever flimsy bridge existed between us. I spent a few hours in a holding cell, booked for misdemeanor assault and property damage. My lawyer, the same woman who'd helped me rectify part of the divorce fiasco, posted bail, and I was released pending a hearing. She told me I could face fines, maybe probation, but probably not jail time if it was a first offense and no one was seriously injured. However, she warned me that my father's or brother's statements could complicate things. Sure enough, Dad's written statement painted me as a ticking time bomb with a history of violent behavior since childhood. Paul provided photos of his damaged car and the bruises on his jaw. My mother offered tearful testimony about how she was terrified for her life. Meanwhile, I tried to show the judge that these people had conspired to cheat me out of money in my divorce, but I couldn't deny I'd attacked them. Ultimately, the judge gave me a stern lecture and recommended anger management. I got off with probation and a hefty fine to pay for Paul's car repairs and some of his medical bills. He'd claimed whiplash and a sprained wrist. My father and Paul didn't bother to hide their smirks in court. It was humiliating, but I swallowed the punishment. Once I was back home, the rage that had sustained me shifted into a dark emptiness. I'd lost my temper and proven them right about me. I was a violent monster in their narrative. That didn't mean they'd leave me alone, though. In fact, a mere week after that hearing, Mom called from a blocked number. I answered out of habit. She started sobbing about how the baby's condition had worsened, that they needed a specialized treatment center, and if I had any moral decency, I'd help foot the bill. My impulse was to hang up, but a shred of guilt made me hesitate. I asked, Why isn't Paul paying? He's the father. She wailed, He lost his job, you know that. We don't have the money, and the baby's got appointments, medication, possibly surgery. She caught her breath. Listen, Tristan, she's innocent in all this. It was you who introduced your brother to your wife. If you had kept them apart, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't have a sick baby in trouble. I nearly laughed at the twisted logic. So now it's my fault that you raised Paul to be a spineless, lecherous idiot who can't hold a job and impregnated my wife? She gasped, offended. Watch your mouth. That's my son you're talking about. I rubbed my temples, exhaling. I'm done. Stop calling me. Then I hung up. They wouldn't let go. Some days later, my mother and father showed up at my door again. An incredibly ballsy move, considering I had a restraining order pending from the assault fiasco, though it was more about me staying away from them. Dad pounded on the door, yelling that I had no right to ignore them. When I opened it a crack, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. I suspect he was worried I'd get violent, but he squared his shoulders. He growled, "This is your last chance to do right by your family." Mom hovered behind him, voice trembling. "Please, Tristan. That baby's in constant pain. We're on the verge of selling the house. You're the only one with resources." My father, shoulders tense, muttered, "You owe us." The audacity made my jaw tighten. "I owe you? For what? You humiliated me in court, lied about me, took my money, let Paul have my wife. Then you had me arrested, and you're telling me I owe you?" My mother tried the emotional angle, tears brimming in her eyes. "She's your niece, Tristan. Don't punish an innocent child because you hate us." I felt the breath hitch in my lungs. That child might share some of my DNA in a sense. She's my brother's kid. But I had no bond with her. The entire pregnancy was born out of betrayal. Still, I couldn't help feeling torn over an innocent baby's suffering. My father hammered on that vulnerability. "You could prevent a tragedy. If you give us the money, she gets the treatment." He paused. "You refuse, and you're a murderer, essentially." That word shot through me. I stared at them, anger and guilt warring inside. A small, nagging voice said, "It's a baby. She didn't choose any of this." But another part of me raged, "Why the hell am I on the hook for these scumbags' mistakes?" I set my jaw. "I won't give you a cent. Take Paul's sorry ass to a job fair. Let Alyssa get off her pedestal and work." My father's expression darkened. "We're running out of time. She's going to need surgery soon." Mom sobbed, covering her face. I felt nothing but a grim ache. "You all made your bed. Now lie in it," I said. Then I slammed the door. They pounded a while longer, but I didn't open it. My father threatened to call the cops again, but for what? Refusing to pay them. Eventually, they gave up and left. I half expected Alyssa to come screaming at me or try to refile for more spousal support. She did contact me, through my lawyer. She wanted me to meet her at a diner and discuss a private arrangement. My lawyer advised me to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. At the diner, Alyssa arrived looking exhausted and furious. As soon as she sat down, she leaned forward and hissed, "You think you're untouchable? I'll find a judge who'll raise your alimony. Don't forget I can claim mental anguish, your assault charges, whatever it takes." I forced myself not to snap. "We're divorced. I paid the settlement. I'm done." She gave me a dark smile. "You always forget how easily the courts believed me last time. You assaulted your own brother, your father. You have a documented anger problem now. I can spin that. Don't test me." I stared at her. The bitterness inside me climbed up my throat like bile. "So that's the plan? Blackmail me into bankrolling your child's medical expenses?" She shrugged, eyes cold. "The kid's got a condition. We need expensive treatment. Paul can't do it alone. Our parents can't manage. You have the money. So yes, that's exactly what I want. Either you do it willingly or I'll drag you back in front of a judge." A savage desire to lash out flared in me, but I contained it. "Paul's the father. You two figure it out." She smirked, swirling her glass of water. "How's that moral compass feeling, Tristan? Letting an infant suffer because you're too petty to help?" Then dropping her voice, she added, "If the baby dies, that's on you." I clenched my fists under the table. I was certain if I didn't stand up right then, I'd do something I'd regret. Without another word, I pushed back my chair and left. She shouted after me, "Don't walk away! You'll regret this!" The entire diner paused to stare. I walked faster, ignoring them. Over the next few weeks, I kept my phone on silent and refused to see or speak to any of them. They tried all angles, threats, pleas, guilt trips, even having random relatives call to beg me. But I was done. Yes, I felt pangs of guilt when I thought about the baby, but I reminded myself, it isn't my child, it isn't my fault. This entire tragedy was set in motion by Paul and Alyssa's betrayal. If they wanted to be a family, they could face the responsibilities themselves. Paul must have seethed with rage at being so helpless. He tried to apply for some jobs, apparently, but nothing stuck. My mother eventually told me, through an email I foolishly opened, that they'd sold off some valuables, borrowed from distant relatives, and scheduled the baby's surgery. "If anything goes wrong, it's on your conscience," she wrote. I hovered over that line for a while, letting it twist the knife in my gut. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I'd stand in the shower, trembling with unresolved anger. Scenes replayed in my head, me slapping Paul in the street, Dad's furious glare, Mom's anguished sobs. I was no saint. Maybe I was indeed a monster for the way I lashed out, but I also couldn't let them keep using me. I wrestled with that moral conflict until I was numb. Update. A month later, there was a knock at my door. Checking through the peephole, I saw no one. Then I realized there was a basket on the doorstep. Heart pounding, I opened the door. Inside the basket were medical bills, a typed note listing expenses, and a photograph of the baby in a hospital bed with tubes attached. On the note, in big red letters, someone had scrawled, "Are you proud of yourself? She might not make it." I shut my eyes, guilt coiling tight in my chest. They were giving me one last push. I carried the basket inside, rummaged through the bills. The amounts were staggering. After a few agonizing minutes, I dialed my lawyer. I asked hypothetically if there was any legal obligation for me to pay. She said, "No, the child isn't biologically yours. You're not on the birth certificate and you owe them nothing." She reminded me that even if they tried to spin a story, it'd be a stretch to get a court-ordered payment from me again. I set down my phone, staring at the baby's photo. She looked so small, eyes shut, tubes in her arms, an innocent victim of all this madness. I caught myself trembling. Then, with a resolved exhale, I stuffed the bills and the photo into the trash. I wouldn't let them manipulate me again. If that made me evil in their eyes, so be it. Update. I wish I could say this story ended neatly, but real life doesn't do neat. I stayed in town, still working my job. My father threatened to call the police anytime I showed up near them, so I made sure never to go near their neighborhood. My mother tried once more to contact me, but I blocked all her numbers. Paul and Alyssa probably curse my name every day. Whether the baby pulled through or not, I don't know. I heard from a distant cousin that the child underwent surgery and survived, but I didn't verify it. Part of me hopes she's okay, that her life won't be tainted by her messed up parents. As for me, I moved forward, on probation, with a fine that stung but didn't bankrupt me, plus the knowledge that I'd broken every bridge with my family. I still see a therapist weekly, forced by the court after my assault conviction update. A year passed. My probation ended. I paid off the fines. My father left me a single voicemail the day my probation ended. "You can't run from what you did to your family. This isn't over." I listened, then deleted it. So far, they haven't contacted me again. I suspect they might if they ever need more money, but at least now, I'm better at shutting them out. I still have the house, though I renovated parts of it to remove any trace of Alyssa. I replaced the bed, painted the walls, tossed out every item that reminded me of her or my brother.